Hi, this is Sue Jackson. I'm just back with a short summary of the books and authors that were at Booktopia. Well, the authors and the books that they were there for. I ended up splitting my Booktopia video into two pieces because it was getting too long. So the other piece, which I will link to here and down below, has all the live video and photos from the event itself, from Booktopia last weekend in Manchester, Vermont, at the Northshire Bookstore. And that part, I ended up taking a lot of videos of the authors speaking this year. So I put all that together in one video, and this video is just me here telling you about the books and the authors that were there. So I hope you enjoy this. Okay, the books and authors who were at Booktopia this year. These are in alphabetical order. This is the list they gave us before it started. First up, and I don't have this to show you anymore because my mom wanted to borrow it before I left her house in Connecticut. The Cemetery of Untold Stories by Julia Alvarez. I listened to this on audio, finished it in the car on the way to my mom's house. I'm not always a big fan of magical realism. I have trouble with it sometimes, but I loved this book. I talked to a couple of people at Booktopia who said they were having trouble getting into it. I would encourage you to stick with the book because it gets better and better. And at the end, and I love when this happens in a book, all the different stories kind of weave together in a very satisfying way. So this is about an author a novelist, very successful novelist living in Vermont, her family is originally from the Dominican Republic. And toward the end of her career, she inherits a piece of land back in Dominican Republic. She decides to move back there and create a cemetery of untold stories for the manuscripts that she never finished. Sometimes it wasn't even a manuscript, but research. There were many cases in her career. She published many successful novels, but there were plenty of cases where she began working on a book and just couldn't finish it. But these unfinished stories, and especially the characters in them, have really stuck with her and kind of haunted her. So she builds a cemetery, she lives on the grounds, a local artist builds these beautiful artistic monuments for each one, but her stories don't want to stay buried. They begin talking, telling the groundskeeper, a local woman she hires, and the author herself their stories. And they're even talking among themselves when there's no one else there to talk about. So yeah, a little bit of magical realism, but it works. Each of the stories is just engrossing. And as I said, they all come together beautifully at the end. Next up, Shop Girls by Jessica Anya Blau. She was a very entertaining speaker. I did not have a chance to read her novel. It just came out on May 6th. Man, I'm still lisping from these Invisaligns. I apologize. But from what I gathered from listening to her speak at the event, Shop Girls is a coming-of-age story about a young woman in her first job in this really fancy store, and the other women that she works with, some older women who've been there forever and kind of look down on the young ones, another young woman who she kind of bonds with, and the main character has lived a pretty sheltered life. She's never even been kissed. And one of the other shop girls who befriends her has lived quite a wild life. And so very much coming of age, sexual awakening, learning who she is. It sounds like a very entertaining novel. Next up, You Can Never Die, a graphic memoir by Harry Bliss. I really enjoyed hearing him speak too. This is another one that just came out on April 29th, so I haven't had a chance to read it, but it's a graphic memoir. I think it is about his dog, and his dog's life with him and his family. It is both written stories and pictures. I guess he's a cartoonist. He explained when he gave his talk that he writes a cartoon called Bliss, which I plan to look up. And so it's filled with his drawings, cartoons, as well as storytelling. So it looked and sounded very good. Next up, Catalina by Carla Cornejo Villavicencio. That is still not published. It comes out May 13th. And unfortunately, Carla got sick and couldn't make it to Booktopia this year. So we had a substitute author that I'll tell you about in a moment. Rabbit Moon by Jennifer Haig. You've already heard me talk quite a bit about this on my channel. Jennifer Haig is one of my favorite authors. When I saw her name on the list for this year, I was so excited. And yes, I was fangirling all weekend. Couldn't believe I got to meet her in person. She signed my book, got to talk to her and ask her questions, all of her novels. I've enjoyed all of her novels. This might be my new favorite. I also really love her novel Baker Towers, which is historical fiction. This one is contemporary, set in the present day in Shanghai, which was quite a departure for her. And I enjoyed hearing her story of how she was in Shanghai on a fellowship, a writer's fellowship, and that's what inspired her to write this novel. And she said her process was very different. She usually spends a lot of time planning, researching, outlining. And here she was in a foreign country. She didn't understand the language. She just it inspired her. She took a notepad and started writing longhand. And that's how she wrote this novel. And it's fabulous. I think it was definitely a favorite at Booktopia this year. So I highly recommend you check out Jennifer Haig, her backlist, as well as her latest novel, Rabbit Moon. The next author was Jean Hanff Korelitz, author of The Plot and the Sequel. And again, you heard me talk a lot about these on my channel. I read them both while we were away on our big road trip. Really just fabulous, super twisty novels. Quite literally literary suspense because they're about authors and the publishing industry. But, and everybody said this, the surprises in these novels, you never see them coming. And even when you think you have things figured out, there are still more surprises. Loved hearing her talk. Absolutely loved these two books. She was asked, no spoilers, it would be easy to spoil these because there are so many twists. You just can't really even talk about the plots. Well, the plot is basically about an author who steals a plot from another writer and has great success with it. That's just the jumping off point. But somebody asked her, and there were no spoilers given in our discussions, but somebody said, given the way this ends, is there a sequel to the sequel planned? And she did sound like that might be coming. So I'm definitely here for it. I actually had low expectations for the sequel because I thought she can't possibly recreate what she did in the plot. She does, and more. If you haven't read these yet, I highly recommend them. Very suspenseful, very twisty, yeah, fast reads. I am currently reading Rooms for Vanishing by Stuart Nadler. Stuart sat at our table for dinner and book trivia. I'm enjoying this book very much. I'm almost halfway. It's an unusual book and a hard book to understand. And I am definitely going to have to call some of my Booktopia friends to talk about it when I finish. So it is about a family in Vienna in the 1930s, a Jewish family, the Altermans, who are separated at the start of the war. The 5-year-old daughter is sent to London on a train, hopefully to save her life. The son is only 6 months old. He's torn out of his mother's arms. The father is taken into the woods with another group of people, supposedly to be shot. And the mother, I believe, goes to a concentration camp. So this is the confusing part. And this isn't a spoiler. This is what the book's about. It's described as an alternate history. Let me see if I can get his words exactly. Decades later, and across the world, the novel finds the Altermans alone in their separate futures, haunted by the loss of their loved ones, each certain that they are the family's sole survivor. So that's what the novel's about. But you don't really know. Did they really all die in the war? And is this imagined histories for them? Did they all live in the war and simply can't find each other? You don't really know what's real and what's not real. And there are literal ghosts in here as well. I read a review in Bookpage that came right out and said, well, they all died in the war. And I thought, I'm not so sure. So it's a really interesting book. It's really thought-provoking. Each of the stories of the 4 family members are engrossing. I'm really enjoying it. Before I went to Booktopia, I finished reading Animal Instinct by Amy Shern. This is a different kind of coming-of-age novel, and I loved her description at Booktopia. She said it's an adult, grown-up coming-of-age novel, which is perfect. It's about a woman in her 40s who is divorced, has just gotten divorced in early 2020. So she's dealing with pandemic, lockdown in New York City, as well as divorce and learning how to live on her own independently. She and her husband had been together since college. She's never dated anyone else. It's all new to her. And her husband was very controlling and overbearing. She was literally just a wife and mother for the last decades. And now she has to try to learn who she is and how she wants to live her life. So it's very much an awakening. Be forewarned, because this isn't for everyone. It is a sexual awakening as well, and it is graphic in those terms. I found it so warm and funny, poignant. She's a software engineer. She writes code. So she decides to create an AI that is the perfect partner. And you can imagine some of what goes wrong with that. Just a really moving novel about a woman in middle age trying to figure out what she wants to do with her life and who she is. So it's all about identity, independence. I really enjoyed it. I also read Optional Practical Training by Shubha Sundar. I enjoyed this novel, and I really enjoyed hearing from Shubha at all of the events. I don't have this book anymore because my mom wanted to borrow this one as well. It is about a young woman. She's an immigrant from India. She's here on a student visa in the U.S. She's just finished college, and the title refers to a real term in U.S. immigration. Optional practical training is an optional extra year of work experience that someone on a student visa can tack on to the end of their student visa for 1 year. So she has a degree in physics. She gets a job teaching physics in a private high school in the Boston area. And so it's all about her settling in, trying to see if teaching's right for her. Her real dream is to be a novelist. And uniquely, this novel is written as a series of conversations. And you don't even always hear directly from her. Many times people are talking to her or at her, but you learn so much about her from this approach. So I loved the author's approach. She did say that this is the first book in a trilogy, that book 2 will pick up with this character. years later when she is married and has a baby. So I'm very interested to continue reading. The Saltstones, Seasons of a Shepherd's Life by Helen Wybrow. This one doesn't come out until June 3rd, so none of us had read it yet, but listening to Helen speak I was almost in tears. Just in her 10-minute talk, she read an excerpt from her book. It is a memoir. As it said, her family raises sheep. It's about being a shepherd, but that kind of has a double meaning because her mother gets dementia, and it's also about caring for her mother with dementia during this time, something that I could really relate to from my husband and I caring for his dad. From the sounds of it, it's going to be a very moving, very poignant memoir, and with a huge focus on nature, which I love. And finally, to substitute for Carla, who couldn't make it, this was interesting what they did. They substituted Kim Van Elkemade. Kim is an author, a novelist, but she also works part-time in Northshire's other store in Saratoga Springs. So she was easy to convince to sub in for the missing author. And it was really interesting to hear her talk about her books. So she doesn't have one that's brand new like the others, but she's written 3 novels, all historical fiction, Orphan Number 8, Bachelor Girl, and her latest, Counting Lost Stars. That one takes place in 2 timelines. In 1960, there's a college student, a young woman, who is studying computer science, one of the few women anywhere really studying computer science at that time, and she gets pregnant. But during her studies, she learns that a big part of Hitler's approach was actually using one of the world's first computers to conduct censuses and to keep track of people, to kind of categorize and divide people up. The other part of the story takes place in 1941 in The Hague with a woman who's a punch card operator working on that very early computer and doing a census that Hitler has ordered. So, sounds fascinating. I do like 2 storylines that come together in historical fiction. After listening to Kim speak this weekend, I would definitely like to read that or any of her other novels.